Okay, now we should be away. We're away? Yes. All right, what I thought we might do is just see how many people we've got online who are directly involved in mine planning versus those who have something to do with supervising or managing them, and those who are none of the above. So I've got two questions here. So if you guys can type into your chat box, this is question one. So if you could just type in 1A, B, or C. And we'll sort of come back with how many of each that we've got. And then I've got a second question, which is question two. So how many are currently in coal, or 2A, 2B metals, or 2C, none of the above? And my trusty assistant Tom will come back to me with the results. So just a bit of a background about me, for those who don't know me. I've been working in mining engineering for 23 years or so. Of that, 20 in coal and 3 in iron ore. I did most of the mining engineering roles in terms of drill and blast, dragline, design, scheduling, etc. Before moving into senior engineer, superintendent, and tech service managers roles. After 10 years in the industry, I went out and started my own mining engineering company 13 years ago. So, during that 13 years, have done numerous jobs, both filling in on site for vacancies as well as project works and so on. I guess I would say, being a mining engineer, I probably am relatively passionate about tech services. I might be biased, but I think that tech services is probably extremely undervalued at most mine sites. And I suppose that's probably one of my goals in the long run, is to try and get it valued more, particularly by operations and other personnel. From the other areas that I guess I'm pretty keen on are scheduling and ore or coal, maximum use of the resource. I guess I'm still astounded at how much we waste of our resource that's in the ground. So welcome to the inaugural webinar. Today is about mine scheduling best practices as I see them, I suppose my opinion, from what I've seen and experienced and so on. It's not to say it's right, it's just what I think. This is our first ever webinar, my second venture into public speaking, so excuse me if I say and a lot, or talk really quick, or suddenly develop a stutter or something like that. And this is the first time we've run a webinar, so from a technology point of view, we think we've got it right. We've done as much testing as we can, and hopefully there will be no major blues. So sorry, Tom's just given me some numbers here. So question one, which was the mine planners, managers, none of the above. We've got 10 people directly related in mine planning, 1 managerial position, and 2 non-mine planners. And the second question around coal, metals, and none of the above. We've got 2 coal, 6 metals, and 0 none of the above. And we must have a whole lot of D's or something, because that doesn't quite add to the same number as the first one. But anyway, that's okay. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts around best practice mine scheduling today, and I guess hopefully people listening sort of learn something along the way. And at the end of the session, there'll be an opportunity for some of those who want to continue to work with us on the mine scheduling side. So first thing I thought that I would just cover right up front is I guess my philosophy on some terms that are used interchangeably in the industry, and that's mine planning and mine scheduling. I think people use the same word, those two words, to mean the same thing. For me, mine scheduling is about the sequencing of equipment and activities and the decisions around productivity assumptions and inputs and all those other sorts of things. So the schedule is determining effectively where something's going to work and when. The design is the designing of the hole in the ground, breaking it into blocks, generating reserves for use in the scheduling, etc. And mine planning, that's the sum of the both. That's mine design and mine schedule. So it's effectively a plan. A plan is how you're going to go and achieve something, which is the design plus the schedule. You can't do it with only one of them. Well, you can, but you might not do it so well. Today we are going to talk about the mine scheduling part. So let's start with some discussion just around, I suppose, this the whole cascading of mine plans. People talk about how you should cascade from the top down. So this is just an example. Mine plan. I've broken it into 5: a life of mine plan, a medium term, short term, weekly, and a daily. Some places do daily, some don't. And I guess for me, the indicative time frames on which you should be doing those, a life of mine should be redoing every year. The medium term plan, which is for me something like 3 to 5 years, you should be redoing that on a quarterly basis, and so on. And certainly the longer term plans give the guidance to the shorter term plans. So theoretically you should be doing a life of mine plan first before you do a medium term plan, before you do a short term plan, and so on. But it also goes the other way, and that is that when you are doing a longer term plan, the beginning of that longer term plan is actually comes from the shorter schedule. So, for example, if someone is doing a life of mine plan, the first 3 years, or whatever the medium term schedule is that they do on site, the first 3 years of that should actually come from the last medium term schedule that was done. I see lots of cases of people doing 3-month plans or something like that, and they're actually scheduling the whole of the 3 months or the 4 months, whatever the time frame is. However, there is another planner on site whose role it is to do the 2 weeks, and so that longer term planner shouldn't be doing the 2-week schedule. They should actually just be butting onto the end of it. The longer term planner is not accountable for doing the short term schedule, does not necessarily know the level of detail, and so on. So they should actually be beginning from the end of the shorter term schedule. And realistically, they're setting the context for the next shorter term schedule that's done by that person. What I might do is go through each of the plans and realistically sort of just talk about my views on why you do each of them. So a life of mine plan is typically about understanding the mine life, which is generally about money. When am I going to stop making money out of this place? But it's also about determining future ore products. It's about understanding what your resource in the ground looks like, how it changes over time. Therefore, are your products that you sell going to change over time? What's your capacity to produce? So, in other words, is the amount of tons of the product that you're going to sell each year change over time, etc. It's about knowing when you need to open up new pits, make major infrastructure changes and those sorts of things. It's also about understanding long-term capex and opex requirements. Certainly about identifying life of mine critical issues. So things around, if we want to maintain tonnage, what sort of strike length do we need to do that? As an example. Considering strategic questions and issues, and I guess what I've always believed is that a good good life of mine plan actually raises as many questions as it answers. And I've always taken the philosophy with a life of mine plan that it will raise a number of questions, and my aim is to probably have the answers to those by the next time I do the next life of mine plan. And it's to provide guidance for the next level plan down, which is what I call the medium term plan. So medium-term planning, that for me is something like a 3 to 5 year plan, and that actually includes the annual plan. The annual plan being the first year of that 3 to 5 year process. Now, it realistically is the time frame within which major decisions are required around things that have a lead time. So, purchase of new equipment, which might have a lead time of 1 to 2 years, and so on. Opening up of new pits, where you might need to move infrastructure, build new haul roads, access ramps, all those sorts of things. Those sorts of things have lead times on them that dictates that you need to carry out a midterm schedule, something like that 3 year time frame, on a greater level of accuracy than the life of mine plan. Sorry, just a minute. Okay. All right. We're sort of just discovering that there's a lag between my pushing buttons at this end and what you guys see at your end. They should be around setting marketing schedules, understanding what the resource is like in the next couple of years, what sort of products it is that you can sell. It never ceases to amaze me in my time in mine planning roles how much marketing just tells mine planning this is what we want, without actually even knowing what necessarily is in the ground, and whether the ore body's changing over the next few years. So for me, it's certainly about some understanding of what the ore body looks like, and in actual fact trying to dictate it the other way to some extent. Certainly about developing more accurate budget costs for the next couple of years, a much greater level of understanding around costs than you will come out of a life of mine plan, and understanding medium-term critical issues, and also providing guidance for the next level of plan down, which is the short-term plan. So the short-term plan is, I guess, for me, ideally something like a 3 to 4 month time frame. And interestingly for me, this is probably what I think is one of the most important plans for the mine planners to do. One of the ones that maybe seems to be insufficiently valued at a lot of sites that I go to. This one is critical because of I suppose two things. For me, this one is about inventory management. So over a 3 to 4 month time frame, you can schedule the activities that you need to set up inventories for the preceding activity, and you should have inventory targets. So for example, drilled and blasted inventory, coal inventory, and so on, whatever they are. It's effectively a matter of, I see the 3 to 4 month planner's role as putting the broken material on the ground, or the coal uncovered, or whatever it is, providing sufficient of inventory of that for the short-term planner, the 2 week planner, to basically have the flexibility to easily achieve whatever it is that they're supposed to from a weekly point of view. The 3 to 4 months is the time frame that you need to ensure that you have those inventories on the ground. So, getting your drilled inventories up, your blasted inventory up, and those sorts of things takes a couple of months. Needs to be in place a few months out. Otherwise, you're going to be having a lot of issues for the poor old 2 week planner. It's certainly also about dictating the sequencing of activities and determining float time or lag time, which is your gap between activities, which is effectively a measure of risk. If every step in the sequence has got to immediately follow the previous step in the sequence, you're just asking for trouble with that plan. It's a high risk plan. One thing falls over, the plan doesn't happen. A 16 week or 12 week schedule is sort of where you can see what are the gaps between my activities and how risky a plan is this. It should be about ensuring that the shipping schedule can be met before confirming boats in most cases, and it's also going to provide guidance for the next level of plan down, which is the weekly plan. And once you get down to a weekly level, realistically this becomes about what can I do with what I have got? Because you can't change much in a 1 to 2 week time frame. Whatever's blasted is blasted. Whatever's uncovered sort of is uncovered. So it's realistically around how do we achieve our targets, be they quantity or quality, with what we have available. Of course, there's always late changes. You can sort of try and squeeze some of those in. It's also about ensuring maximum use of your equipment, minimised idle and deadhead time and so on. It's about the correct feed to the processing plant to achieve quality requirements, managing your ROM and product stockpiles, and guidance for the daily plan if you happen to do daily planning. The whole need for daily scheduling is realistically it's a horses for courses. Some mine sites do need to schedule the next couple of days ahead every day. A lot of mine sites weekly scheduling is good enough. Either way, what this is about is effectively coordination of all mine site activities over the next couple of days, which is mining, maintenance, prep plant, all those sorts of things. It's about ensuring that the relevant site personnel know what is happening and what their critical issues are in their area, and what it is that they have to make sure happens. And it's about maximising equipment usage. And the interesting thing to note about the either the daily or the weekly, whichever one is your lowest, shortest time frame schedule that you do, the interesting thing to note about that is that that's the only schedule that happens. The rest of those schedules that all get you down to this point are effectively all just leading to the daily or weekly schedule. That's the only one that mine operations take and put into place. Now, what you can do, and I did this for a client, manganese mine, I think it was from memory, is you can actually draw up a sort of a table around the whole best practice and just sit back and make sure that you've got these things covered. And so, for example, this is for mine scheduling greater than monthly. So if we use the life of mine as an example, should be carried out on an annual basis, redone every year. The schedule length is obviously the life of mine. Some places, long life mines might use 15 years or something like that. The schedule period, the period that you report on within the schedule, is on a yearly basis. The primary drivers when you are carrying out the schedule, what is it that you're thinking about and aiming for and so on, and normally around costs, they're around margin ranking, maximum NPV, and achieving the right quality of products. Normally you're only scheduling just waste and ore excavation. You're not scheduling drill and blast or all those other sorts of things. Schedule 2 would be something like XPAC or something that's unlikely you're going to be doing it in a spreadsheet, but you might be. In this case, for this particular client, the data inputs into a life of mine schedule for the existing pits were their pit shells, be it Serpac or Vulcan or whatever. New pits, it was Whittle shells. And it was just all block model information. There was no shorter term information in terms of assay information or grade control information. The sort of outputs from the schedule are going to be annual volumes, product tons and qualities, major equipment requirements over the life of mine, and in an ideal world, some indication around trucking requirements as well, which comes from some sort of destination scheduling. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can sit down and do those sorts of tables for every one of your time frame schedules, and that's a sort of useful exercise to actually provide guidance to the planners about what is it that they should be thinking about and so on when they're actually scheduling. So what I might do now is actually just talk a little bit about scheduling versus design, and an important thing for mine schedulers to understand in the scheme of when they're carrying out their job. Mine schedules are generally scrutinised in much more detail as you head up the corporate ladder than design work. I mean, I guess the classic thing is how many of you know a general manager or vice president or anything who's ever wanted to see your truck and shovel design or even your drill and blast design or anything. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that schedule outputs in terms of what it is that your mine is going to do this month, this year, or whatever it is, head up the corporate ladder, and they generally head all the way up to the top somewhere. As you head up the corporate ladder, the managers from above you need to be able to answer any questions that come from their manager. So they're going to want to know in detail, have some understanding of that schedule. So there is a distinct difference between scheduling and design. Rarely does someone way up the ladder want to understand the design concepts that are used, but they will want to understand the schedule. And secondly, because those numbers are reported far and wide, from a corporate point of view, investors, all those sorts of things, people want to have some level of confidence in them, and that means they're going to be much more interested in it than they are in design. And that's something certainly to understand as a mine scheduler. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about now was mine scheduling measures, KPIs, whatever you want to call them. Something that's always interested me is rarely have I ever seen in the industry measures of how good a mine plan is. And I find that intriguing given the importance of mine scheduling in the success of mines and so on. It's always intrigued me that there'll be KPIs for heaps of things, for all sorts of things, and yet I haven't really seen much in the way of KPIs for mine schedules. So I'm going to tell a little story about when I was the grade control superintendent at Paraburdoo many years ago, and we used to have to build 2 stockpiles every week, a lump stockpile and a fine stockpile, and we had 4 qualities for each. So we had 8 qualities that we were trying to monitor and watch as we were trying to build stockpiles, and some of those qualities were important and some were not quite so important. Not to say they weren't important, but they were easy to forget. And we had a scenario where one of the grade controllers got the important things such as the fines alumina and the lump iron spot on, and sort of forgot about the silica to some extent because it was generally something that people didn't focus on that much. But it turned out that the silica was so far out that the stockpiles were effectively unusable. And that caused a bit of pain, caused a bit of grief for me, certainly. And I guess one of the things that I sat down and put in place at the time was what I called the run score, which was a measure of how good that run was. And what we did was we took the 8 qualities and we ranked them between 0 to 10 in terms of whatever was the most important quality, be it lump iron, that scored a weighting of 10, everything else was weighted against it. And then we took the difference from target. So if we had a target lump of 63% and we missed that by 1% or whatever, we multiplied that difference by the weighting, summed that up across the 8 qualities, and that gave us an indication of how good the plan was, or how good the actuals were. And in that instance, 0 was the perfect score, and we sort of set it up with a weighting that somewhere around about 100 was a fairly bad performance. And what was interesting was that it gave the grade controllers, who were basically quasi-planners, an interesting way as they were scheduling to, because we set it up in the spreadsheet, to just try lots of different options and not have to decide for themselves whether this iron was better than that alumina difference and so on. It actually just gave them one measure at the bottom, and they could run just so many different options and instantly see a score that told them whether it was better than the previous version that they'd run. So it became a really good measure from a point of view of scheduling. What it also became, that I didn't necessarily think of at the time, was it actually became a very good performance measure. So it was quite ironic that the same grade controller, who happened to be an extremely good grade controller. Got the best score for the year of 18, but they also got the worst score for the year of 530, I think, from memory. And so that was an interesting performance appraisal discussion when I sat down. So it became a good performance measure, and in actual fact, what it actually becomes is it just becomes a good planning tool in terms of, is our planning getting better, is our planning getting worse, what is it that's getting in the way of poor planning? And for us, one of the things that we certainly found out of the exercise was that we could basically link the run scores to the inventories that we had available. If we had broken stocks that was on spec and a good quantity, then the grade controllers came up with much better run scores week in, week out. But if we had a set of broken stocks that was a long way off spec or was in the wrong place and so on, it just became extremely difficult for grade controllers to achieve good scores. Now, the interesting thing about that was that while it worked well, it was a challenging exercise to put it in place in the first time. I mean, basically I sat down, I had to try and decide by discussions with other people and my experience and so on, I had to try and decide what was more important, to sort of miss the iron by 1% or to miss the alumina by 0.03% and so on, and to just try and do that ranking across 8 qualities in itself was difficult enough, although it is the sort of thing that you can fine tune once you put it in place. But what you can also do is quality was king, but you can take that and then you can throw in other things. So for example, you can add parameters and therefore scores around inventories. Have you maintained the right inventories? What sort of production rates is it going to achieve? How many times have you got to move pieces of equipment? How well is your shorter term plan following the longer term plan, and so on. So it worked. It worked very well once we put it in place. Now, what I might talk about is, I guess, the extract way. My philosophy towards scheduling. People who I have anything to do with their scheduling, I guess to some extent, my philosophy, my set of rules for how it works. And this is not a photo of me. I found someone else, some anonymous person on the web somewhere. But for me, if you do a mind schedule, it's your baby, it's yours, and you need to own it. And I really do stress that in terms of scheduling. And what that means is, to me, is that if you put out a mind schedule, you need to know it. When questions come back, you need to know it. We've lost audio. Okay. Can anyone still hear me? I'm back? So, okay. All right. I won't swear just yet then. So if you're putting out a mind schedule, you need to know it. If questions come back, you need to know it. You need to own it. You need to understand things such as where the reserves came from that are in it. You know, what of them are long-term design reserves versus short-term design reserves? What are the assumptions that have gone into the schedule around equipment capabilities and equipment production rates, and where did they even come from? Where did the numbers come from that are in it? The calculations that are involved in getting from a set of import volumes to the values that you are actually scheduling on. And so, you know, the whole thing around recoveries and moistures and rehandles or whatever they are. If I'm doing a schedule, I endeavour to make sure that I understand the processes, the steps that are along the way, and the equipment paths and sequences. And certainly one thing I would stress to people is that if you're doing the scheduling and you think something looks a little bit strange, then you should go and check it out, because if not, there is a likelihood that someone up the ladder somewhere is going to think that looks a little strange, and it's going to get that scrutiny that I talked about earlier, and you will be asked. And it's much better to have the answer, or to have already fixed the problem. So one of the things that I can't stress enough is that if you put out a schedule and you don't know it well enough and people start asking questions, there is nowhere to hide. There's no one you can blame, and you do fairly quickly look incompetent, and one of the key things is that you lose credibility to some extent, and people have long memories for something that you might have done wrong and short memories for the 50 other things you've done right, and people may decide that you're not a good mind planner and so on. So know your schedule. All of that means that to me, I'm a bit old school, have a bit of a personal bias against black boxes to some extent, and I guess by black boxes I mean sort of optimization schedulers and these sorts of processes that you basically set some parameters up and click a button and Bob's your uncle, it comes back with the best answer. Meanwhile, you may not necessarily know why it's done what it's done, or and so on. In my case, before we choose to use some sort of optimization scheduling software or program on a schedule, we put it under careful consideration as to the consequences and so on. And I guess I have a similar comment around dependency rules and other sorts of shortcuts that are just around making the process quicker. Transparency is a key part of the scheduling process. So transparency is about being as open as possible around what you've done and why you've done it. So for me, all inputs into the schedule, such as productivity assumptions that you've made, other scheduling parameters, your methodology around your sequencing, constraints that you've assumed and so on, should be clearly spelt out somewhere. There's a process. I've been to mine sites that have both. It goes both ways. My belief is that mine plans should be signed off at some sort of managerial level. I don't believe that a mine planner with 3 to 5 years, for example, experience should be carrying the can for the schedule and the mine site, the following of it by the mine site. And so from the point of view of someone more senior signing off, you need this sort of transparency. You need things documented and so on, so the person signing off understands what it is they're signing off on. So my suggested process for that is to commence something like a PowerPoint or something else. As soon as you start the planning process, every time you make an assumption, come to a decision, carry out some calculations as to why you should do this or that or whatever, just cut and paste them or whatever into a PowerPoint document. If you have a process at your site where you need to do a presentation around the mine schedule that you've just done, then in actual fact a lot of that will just form part of the presentation anyway. I think that there's another key thing is just around understanding what drives the schedule. When you are scheduling, what are the things that you need to consider and what is it that you're aiming for? And so therefore understanding what I call the schedule drivers. And they will be different between different length plans, and they may even be different in the same plan. They may be different from one period to the next as something about the mine changes. So, longer term planning, for example, the schedule drivers are more often around maximising cash flow early, so maximising NPV and so on. Whereas in the shorter term plans, it's more often around achieving quality or production targets, because obviously you need to sell a certain quality product, so quality is a key focus from a short-term plan point of view. But I think it is key to understanding those for each of the different time frame schedules that you do, and whether something has changed at your mine site, which means that the main drivers have changed. I can't stress enough the need to check things before you report them. Check your schedule outputs before you report them. As I said earlier about the scrutiny thing, they're typically going somewhere up the ladder, and that's when a mistake can be extremely embarrassing. I never automatically assume that whatever's come out in some programmed report is right. I've used XPack for many years, and I certainly know myself in the early years I put out schedules reports that had the wrong values in them because I had the weighting set it up wrong, or I had the activity field set up wrong, or something along those lines. So for me now, for example, when I run an XPack schedule, more often than not, and certainly the first time, I will go and do something simple when I finish a schedule, like just set up a really rough database range that sort of matches where I've scheduled, and actually just check the quantities in that database range versus the quantities that are coming out in a schedule report. So realistically, it's just about make sure you have that sanity check. Don't just assume it's right. Communication. Can't talk importantly enough about communicating a plan. I guess one way that I look at it is that you can create the best schedule design or anything else in the world. It's useless if you can't communicate it so that the people who've got to put it in place understand it, understand what's important, what's not, what's critical, etc. And certainly from a communication point of view, there's a couple of things there. One is when you are making decisions around the scheduling side, and so you are deciding on inputs, schedule inputs, productivity assumptions, whatever they are. I more often than not will make sure I have those in writing somewhere. So I will typically use email for those sorts of communications rather than jumping on the phone. Sure, it's much quicker to jump on the phone, but if I want to confirm, maintenance down period or something around the productivity side or something along those lines, I typically will send off an email to the person. That allows me to check again later just to make sure that I've got it right, and it also gives it to me in writing in case I need it in writing for any reason. And one way to look at the whole communication thing is that if we just think about plans and we talk about the quality of the plan, so high quality plans versus low quality plans, and we talk about the communication of those plans, low quality versus high quality. If you've got a whole lot of people and you're putting out low quality plans and you have got low quality communication of those plans, then I would suggest you need some new planners. If you've got a low quality plan but the communication of it is high, to me you've got a bunch of salesmen. If you've got a high quality plan but the communication of it is not much chop, you've got a bunch of boffins, and hopefully you've got high quality plans and high quality communication. That's the A team. That's what you should be aiming for. Much of what I've said today is covered in I write a blog, people are welcome to go and read my blog, and I do tend to write a lot about mind planning. Sometimes I slip into other subjects that other people find actually more interesting than mind planning, but I will certainly just be writing blogs as subjects come to mind, and if people want comments or anything on anything, they're fine to prompt me with something. Now, what I thought we might do is we might just talk a little bit about the value of mind planning, or maybe the cost of poor mind planning and so on, and do a little bit of an exercise here. So for me, the cost of poor mind planning can show up in a lot of areas, but the primary area it's going to show up in is your production department's costs. They will be, I would say, much higher than if you've got quality planning. So what I want to do is a little quick survey, and Tom's going to record the results for us. And so I'm wondering if people can type into the chat box there, those who certainly have anything to do with mine planning and so on. What do you think is the difference in cost of production to the mine production department and their budget between a good mining planning team and a poor mine planning team from a percentage point of view? So, a good mine planner or good mine planning team, good tech services team and so on, how much difference do they make to mine production's performance? And while that's happening, I might just give some example calcs, and then we'll collect the results and see what sort of we come up with. So if I take an average coal mine, for example, that might be producing 4 million ROM tonnes in a year, and if they have a strip ratio of 11 to 1, say, then you're moving about 44 million cubic metres of waste in a year. If you, let's say that waste, including drill and blast and topsoil removal and all those other sorts of things, costs about $5 a BCM, then your mine planning, your mine production budget is somewhere around, say, $220 million a year. And so if the difference between poor mine planning and good mine planning is 1%, then that's $2.2 million a year, and difference in the production department's budget, just as a result of 1% alone. Now, I'm just seeing how many results we've got here. Okay. So far, and I think some of these might be the other way around maybe, but so far I've got 20%, 30%, 30%, 10 to 15% and 25%, say. So that's an average of around about 20% or so. So even if we're conservative and say 5%, for a mine site with a mine production budget of 220 million, 5% is 10 million, $11 million, for example. That's a lot of money. That's a big set of numbers. And that's money that's basically down the drain. Once it's spent, it's spent. It's not coming back, basically. So that's an area that I guess I think I've been around a bit and hopefully can help. And so I've just got a bit of an offer here around the fact that I will personally come to your mine site, carry out an informal audit of your mine planning. We'll spend a couple of days or whatever's required at site reviewing processes, interactions, activities, etc. We'll carry out, provide a PowerPoint presentation with recommendations as to issues and solutions, and then give unlimited email and phone access for the next month or so just to further discuss those issues. What we'll do is we'll do that for $2,000 plus travel expenses, which is certainly pretty low in cost compared with the results of poor mine planning. So I am available to do 5 trips over the next couple of months, and that's open to the first 5 to nominate, which you can do by either sending me an email at my email that's listed on the screen, or to the registrations email address. I appreciate that some people may not be authorised to spend money. Certainly in today's environment, authorisations to spend money might be a long way up the ladder somewhere. But look, that's fine. If you think you might be interested or anything, then just nominate and go ahead and speak to your supervisor later and so on. What I want to do is close it off there. Thanks everyone for